Have you seen this clip? It's generally unexpecting to most. I do not know who Prof. Robert Sapolsky is, Professor Robert Sapolsky, but I remember always being recommended to me, like in 2016, his lecture on Introduction to Human Behavioral Biology, 17 million views. And it's really interesting. Yeah, halitosis. It's really interesting. Thank you, Zach, for sharing it. I think the only issue I have with it is that I don't think there needs to be any justification for accepting trans people aside from the fact that they want their gender to be affirmed socially. I don't think you need to have, all right, this part of the brain shows that you're actually a male, and therefore through that justifies you being treated as a man. I think you saying, hey, I feel a lot better about myself, I'd be a lot happier, I would function better if I was treated like a man. I think that's the justification that's strong enough. Still valid research, and it's important. Yeah, it's all post-mortem. Yeah, for sure. So like you can only affirm the gender of someone once they die. So it's not like it has like practical effects in the sense of like it doesn't delegitimize transgender people. But yeah, it's more like a now you know. But like yeah. Like the way I prefer tackling it, I don't know. We're gonna watch a Ben Shapiro video. Woohoo! Who's down for a Ben Shapiro video? But it's the one with Neil deGrasse Tyson. You might have seen it. The way Tyson approaches it is less from a biological / call it like scientific approach to gender. He's a lot more. He actually considers a lot more the sociological side of gender and of transgenderism, which to me is a bit more convincing and important in a way. Not that making studies on brains of transgender people is not important. Any knowledge is important to look for. Very often, there's like this need to scientifically justify the existence and the validity of trans people, which I think it's I understand. And it comes from like trans people themselves and, who want to justify themselves, especially to conservatives. But here I want to look at, and also like scientific acknowledgement or attempts at just justifying transgender people is not necessarily bad either. I'm not saying it's bad, but there's, to me, the better justification, which will come here from Ben Shapiro, who loves trans people. The better justification comes from Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's known to be the science guy or the science person, or because science guy is Bill Nye. Is that it? We're gonna watch this, and this if it's the right answer that I remember is to me an answer to justifying transgender people through biology, or trying to delegitimize trans people through biology or through science.
The left is militating against the advent of science. One of those areas is the area of transgenderism.
Okay, why the fuck are they so close? Why
the advent of science? One of those.
Why are they so uncomfortable? Like their knees are also are almost touching. I hate this. It makes me uncomfortable. Nose to nose, foreheads touching, and talking to each other in the eyes.
Those areas is the area of transgenderism. The argument that is typically made by gender theorists is that gender is entirely separate from sex. You've seen the argument made that it makes no difference on average if men are stronger than women are, and that if we were to allow transgender women to compete with non-transgender women, then this would somehow not disadvantage biological women. And this seems to me absolutely ascientific, that if we're actually going to have a discussion about gender and sex, that should be based in data, which suggests that mammals are in fact binary in terms of their sex, unless you have intersex birth defects typically, or genetic defects.
I'm happy to opine on this. This only matters because today we segregate nearly all sports by gender. Otherwise, why do you even give a shit? What someone identifies with. So we live in a free country, and with consenting adults and people free expression of who and what they are.
Man, on adult level, I agree with you. I think it does matter what you teach children.
And so there's the matrix of what you are biologically, how you express yourself, who you choose as a sexual partner. If we actually live in a free country, as we tell ourselves, people's freedom to behave in any of those ways should not concern you at all. Nor are they requiring that you behave that way. Okay? This is for their own freedoms, because we live in a free country. Now, what is unresolved here is, what do you do with sports? It's unresolved. And I've followed that closely, and I don't see any meaningful solutions to come down off of that. We know that hormones manifest differently in different people, and there's the whole thing with steroids. Steroids are hormones, right? And we rallied against steroids in professional sports because it gives you an undue advantage. So I've tried to think of what the future of sports would be in the world of a gender spectrum. And it may be, you don't specify whether it's a male or female sport. You just take measurements of what your hormonal balances are. And so you compete based on your hormonal. It's a thought I had. I don't know. I don't know where it's going to land.
The WNBA won't be in business for very long if that's the case.
It would just be, you'd have to find some way to compete people against each other if you still care that sports is an interesting activity.
I guess the area where it does come up in a non-sports.
I love that. If you still care that sports is an interesting activity, because I don't. So we I mean, professional sports, right? You can still have sports. Who gives a fuck? You can still have sports and play with your buddies at hockey, basketball, whatever. Here, it only matters because of professional sports. And in the American, very specifically American case, I mean, it's all over the world, but especially America. Sports are so popular only because tuition fees are extremely high, and it's one way for people to actually have access to education is through professional sports. It's one of the reasons why the stakes are high. But aside from that, I don't know. I don't give a fuck about sports, and it's true. I think he's right. I think sports are the only place where it's kind of debatable, and where a debate and a conversation should be had. But I don't care. And from what he says, what Tyson says, he says we might have to re-examine if sports are still an interesting or a good activity to be had.
Area.
Yeah, tell me. I don't know.
So it would be you talk in your book about the education.
Oh, by the way, they're talking beyond sports. Ben Shapiro thinks that transgenderism is pervading the kids, obviously. So now they're going to go beyond sports
in a non-sports area.
Yeah, tell me. I don't know.
So it would be you talk in your book about the education of children and teaching children about science. And right now, children are being taught about the quote unquote gender spectrum, which is not scientifically based. That is a theory based idea.
No, wait, hold on. People express themselves on a spectrum. So you learn that.
That's a social point, not a scientific point.
It's
meaning we express ourselves based in different languages. Is that something you teach in science class, or is that something that you teach when you're teaching language?
So whether the fact that people want to express themselves on a spectrum, on a gender spectrum, whether that fact is something you want to put in a sociology class or in a science class, maybe that remains to be determined. But it is a real fact about real society.
Well, of course, nobody's denying that people identify how they want to identify.
So
the question is, what is the relationship of that to biology? Meaning that the argument is made that trans women are women, for example. And what that seems to mean is that trans women are identical to women. Now, if people want to say trans women are not biological women, obviously that is the case. But people don't seem to want to say that. Although that is obviously scientifically true. Trans women are not biological women. Biological women are biological women.
But where are you going with this? What are you trying to accomplish by asking yourself, is it science or is it not science? It's people in society.
But this is a perfect example of an area where suddenly it doesn't matter to say things that are just true. Like, why is it bad or wrong to point out?
I have another way to approach this. I care what is objectively true in the world as a scientist. But let me not say even as a scientist. I just simply care what is objectively true. And science happens to be a pretty potent path to invoke, to find out what is true. And so if people express themselves on a gender spectrum, and that is an actual thing in an actual society, if we have not fully explained that scientifically, that's an interesting frontier to study. If you want to say it's only sociological, then it's the purview of the social sciences. I don't care who studies it. It's an interesting fact about society that's worth learning about. To fight someone and say, it's not biological, it's just your this, it's real and it's there.
Well,
because it's real because it manifests.
But it is real because it manifests. But the question of how to classify manifestation is a scientific question. Meaning that, for example, there was a woman over at Brown University. Mm-hmm. She came out with a study that suggested that there was a phenomenon called rapid onset gender dysphoria, in which a member of a particular group would suffer from gender dysphoria, and this person's immediate peer group would suddenly have an onset of gender dysphoria. This paper was so controversial that Brown tried to pull it, and then was forced to reassign it later. You see this sort of treatment of science.
Question. What you're asking now is, are there some topics that should not be studied scientifically?
Right.
And is there some taboo? And Sam Harris speaks a lot about this.
Yes.
And I think the concern is, if you study some topic that's a hot button topic and you bring scientific methods and tools to it, we don't trust, I'm interpreting here, I think we as a society don't trust that people in charge in a free country won't try to legislate something that will constrict people's freedoms in the face of that information. I think that's the fear.
Well, isn't that...
It's a fear.
I mean, and isn't that...
We don't trust our own ability to govern ourselves in the face of what could be some information relative to other kinds of information.
Isn't that a bit of a problem?
Yes. Yeah. It's not. It means it's not a free society. It's not.
Isn't that a bit of a problem that we're trying to that we try to pass laws against trans people? Like, isn't it a bit of a problem that by getting some data, we might pass laws that will take away the freedom of trans people? Says Ben Shapiro. Yeah, it is kind of a problem. Yeah.
Society of free inquiry, which I think you need ultimately. But yeah.
My general take on all of this stuff, from climate change to gender dysphoria to all of these issues, is bring out the science and then let's hash it out. I think that the problem I'm seeing on a lot of sides...
What is your motivation?
Why? Why does that matter?
It matters because if you have political power, you could end up creating legislation that subtracts freedoms from people who previously were enjoying the same freedoms as you. The history of that exercise...
Then make a better argument.
...doesn't end well.
Well, but the history of which exercise? Bring out all the science and let's hash it out?
I'm saying, if you bring out all the science and the politicians hash it out, the history of that exercise is a recipe for disaster if it involves discoveries that put people's freedom, as defined in our Constitution, at risk.
But now you're arguing for limitations on areas of particular study.
No, I'm arguing on, we need a way to we need a way to protect people's freedoms in the face of whatever gets discovered scientifically.
So
I'll give it.
I mean, I agree. I think that's what the Constitution is for.
It's a really interesting take by Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's like, because the issue here, I don't think that what he's afraid of is that there's laws that can be passed with when some scientific discovery comes out where the science and the social clash, in the sense of like, yes, gender as it manifests socially is different from how biology manifests biologically, right? Or how sex manifests biologically. And there might be a difference between that. And I think what like Tyson is saying is the concern that he's expressing is that by attacking sex and biology and not taking into consideration gender and its social effects and its ways of affirming oneself and of talking about oneself and expressing oneself, by looking at one and not the other, you can do a lot of harm. And the issue with focusing on the biology is that you may disregard the sociology of the issue, which can create a lot of negative effects.
So disregard rights from,
but we're always fighting the constant. People who want rights are always fighting others who are saying they don't get the rights from the Constitution. This is a daily challenge on the progressive left. It is a daily challenge, right? Here's an example. I forgot how I ended up getting this phone call. It was some magazine that serves the gay community. And I remember why, because they wanted my opinion on, they wanted my opinion about whether being gay was biological or mental.
Right, there's that new study that came out, this vast study.
Biological.
Right,
okay?
Right.
And I said, I don't care which it is. Find out what it is, fine. But the answer to that question should have no consequence on legislations or laws. Because, for example, suppose it said it's purely biological, okay? Then you say, oh, that explains it. Suppose it says it's purely psychological. What are you going to do now? You say, well, now you're going to go to the reorientation camps or whatever those are called, where they realign you because they say it's psychological.
Ben Shapiro is laughing because that's what he wants.
Logical rather than biological. All of a sudden, people start behaving in ways in society that want to constrict the freedom of expression of who and what people are. And that is a danger. So maybe there needs to be a line in the sand. Let science do what it does, but politicians keep us free. Yet there's so many politicians that are doing the opposite of that.
So why aren't you a libertarian? I mean, I'm a libertarian. Come over here. Just
okay.
This guy's not a libertarian. This guy's not a libertarian. It's so interesting though. It's a really great conversation where someone who's not calling himself a libertarian is more libertarian than the person who's questioning him. I think it's the last example is really interesting in terms of like discerning the biological from the sociological. Because Shapiro libertarian, yeah, of course, haha. But the whole idea that something is biological or not should have no bearing on, in this case at least, on the rights of some people to express themselves in whatever way they want, right? Yeah, if there's a gene that makes you transgender, or if there's like a gene that makes you gay, all right, well, fine. You know, if being gay is not natural for some reason, right? We make a discovery where gay is not natural. Okay. So what? So what? People are allowed to be gay if they want to, despite if it's backed up by biology or not. Even if it was completely unnatural and it would be completely biologically wrong for me to, to express myself in whatever way. Let's say I dye my hair blonde. All right? You don't see my hair very often. This is my hair, okay? It's growing. It's growing back from when I shaved it. It's kind of in an awkward phase where it's always standing up because I'm wearing this all the time. But this is my hair. What if I decided to dye it blonde? That would be against my biology. That would be against, and scientifically, it is against my biology. Scientifically, it is like unnatural for me to be blonde because it's not in conformity with my genes. If there's a paper that comes out and says Sean's hair shouldn't be blonde because in nature their hair is black. Okay, fine. You did a study where you realize that my hair is not actually black, and that I dyed it blonde. Does that mean I should keep my hair black? No. And that's why like Tyson's saying, I don't give a fuck. I mean, sure, let's find the truth on Sean's hair color, but whether it's blonde or black, or if it's possible for me to be blonde biologically, doesn't really matter. Because in the end, my hair can be whatever the fuck, whichever color I want it to be. So I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting conversation. I know people in chat were saying they don't like Neil deGrasse Tyson, but I like his take on this. I haven't seen much of his other takes, honestly. When you put it to like a topic that's not as much of a hot button topic, or one that's so sensitive, you realize how kind of ridiculous it is. Search Neil deGrasse Tyson veganism on YouTube. We talked enough about veganism in my last stream. We talked a lot about it, and I do not want to go down that rabbit hole once again. I think the interesting part of that video with Neil deGrasse Tyson, was that he said we should maybe reevaluate if sports are a valid activity. That was my favorite part personally.